So why are we here today? We want to breathe, we want to live, we want great livability here in the state of Oregon, and we want to stop making Oregon the coal chute for Asia. So our gathering here in Salem today represents just one of several events happening today across the state of Oregon in order to sound the alarm to stop coal exports. While we're here today at our Capitol, there's citizens marching through Hood River, ringing bells from Riverside Community Church to Overlook Park. Among their numbers are faith leaders, elected officials, business owners, and young people, just to name a few. In Portland, school children at Sunnyside Elementary School and undergraduates at Reed College will be ringing their bells, raising their voices with ours, sounding the alarm. Today, people from across the state are joining together with a common message: stop coal exports from hurting our community and our planet before it's too late. A year ago, I didn't know about coal trains. I didn't care about coal trains. And it was a grassroots support organization in the city of Milwaukee that brought forward information to the city council. City council authorized me to do further research to put together a resolution about our position on coal trains. And at the time, we didn't know whether we supported or opposed coal trains. But after several months of research, interviews, evaluations, we adamantly oppose coal trains coming through our community. There's a map here that shows more than 30 cities, counties, and other entities that have passed resolutions concerning their concern for opposition to coal exports, and I'm proud to say that our city, the city of Milwaukee, is on that map. There's a lot of yellow on that map. Let's keep it rolling. Also out in the audience, you see a number of signs. Hold up your sign if you represent a coal train. You see all these signs? These signs represent about 100 coal trains, or coal cars. A coal train is at least 100 cars, and this is what it would represent. This is one train, one coal train coming through our community. Now, folks, if you have a coal train sign, put your sign down. Now raise your sign if you represent a coal barge. The proposal for the port in the Columbia River Gorge, 48 coal barges down the Columbia River every week, and this is what 48 coal barges might look like. So we have a few speakers today, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Marshall Runkle is a partner at Green Home by Ecotech, a Portland-based commercial and residential energy efficiency improvement business. He serves as the president of the Home Performance Contractors Guild of Oregon, a trade association of more than 60 home performance and Energy Star companies that collectively employ over 1,000 people.
Thanks for the introduction. I'm a partner in a small environmental services firm, and I have the honor right now to serve as the president of a guild of small businesses throughout the state that do energy efficiency work in people's homes. I'm also here today with another business person, Tim Hitchens, who's a co-owner of the Blossoming Lotus restaurant in Northeast Portland. Tim's one of the leaders of the Northwest Food Movement, and his restaurant is less than 1 mile from 2 potential coal train routes. I guess I'm going to go very short, and it's unsurprising to me that the coal industry is hanging the arguments for coal on jobs, because jobs is a very powerful issue. We all have jobs. We all need to have jobs. I say, apart from being there to marry my wife and being there for the birth of my daughter, out of my life. There's an interesting story about how the coal industry is co-opting or trying to co-opt the jobs argument. The other morning, I have a stand-up morning with my crew on Monday mornings, and one of my crew members came in with a Morrow Pacific hat on. I'm like, what's up with the Morrow Pacific hat? He's like, well, they pay me to go to this meeting. I'm like, yeah, that's unsurprising, the tactics. So it's very important and very powerful. I don't think anybody here is getting paid to come to this rally. It's the grassroots. It's us who do a friend of mine, say it's the irrational optimists who spend their time trying to make good in our community. So I'd like to thank everybody for being here today to add their voice to the Voices Against Coal.
And our next speaker is a community volunteer. She's the historian, land use chair, and co-chair of the Woodlawn Neighborhood Association in Northeast Portland. She's been a member of the Woodlawn Neighborhood Association for the past 28 years and is one of the original neighborhood planners in the Woodlawn Plan, a community development document. Welcome, Angela Ellaby.
I am escorted, raise your signs please, by many other neighborhood associations. Our neighborhood has emphatically taken a vote against coal transport. We have train lines right through our neighborhood. The original town of Woodlawn was a small farm community, but back in 1888, a passenger railroad from Portland was built out to Woodlawn. Railroad, good. The passenger railroad was extended into Woodlawn Center. Train station was built on a triangular block. Our town flourished. Right into your mouth. Yeah. Okay. My husband and I enjoy living in Woodlawn. It's experiencing a bit of a renaissance after a few very nasty decades. But now, almost 130 years after its founding, these proposed coal transports, train especially, would go through our neighborhood and choke our prosperity and our property values. These coal shipments would bring no jobs to our neighborhood, yet we and the residents of cities, farms, and neighborhoods along the 1,000 miles from the mines to the terminals would have to literally stand by and suffer. We would turn off our cars at the crossings and wait while the coal dust puffs out over us from the long, dirty trains, chugging their way through our midst. I can envision emergency vehicle drivers not being able to get to where they're sorely needed because the long coal trains would block the crossings. I can imagine more noise from crossings because of increased rail traffic. I know that some cities, Linton, some cities would be having their business districts cut off from their residential districts because of those trains. No jobs would be created along the train route, it would be job prevention. In addition to railcar transport, Amber Energy's Morrow Pacific project proposes to barge coal past my neighborhood using unproven coal technology. Across the river in Longview, they want to build a terminal and coal trains from there could chug through Portland. Stopping the Morrow Pacific project is the first step towards stopping all coal transport. What person thinks it's a good idea to impede, impair, or destroy the lives and livelihoods of thousands so that coal, the very definition of global warming contributing fossil fuel, can be toxically train transported and then shipped overseas? There it would be burnt, as it is in the U.S. and other countries, and then the toxic waste would blow back across the ocean to us. 18% of the mercury found on the snow sampled on Mount Bachelor originated from coal burned in Asian power plants. Do we want that number to increase?
No!
And the adverse health issues of coal dust are well documented. Black lung is widely known about, yet another common problem is the accumulation of mercury in the human body upon too much exposure. My husband has already been exposed to mercury and other toxic metals, and it really messes up his health and quality of life. We work with 3 doctors trying to clean his body of it, and we're making slow progress. But now we could be getting trains full of toxic coal dust coming through our neighborhood, disposing, people, plants, pets, water, and air to more of this substance. We emphatically oppose the Morrow Project plan. As historian, I learned that people in my neighborhood rejoiced when they could get rid of their old coal furnaces because the filth from the coal dust was pervasive in their homes and impossible to clean up. Let us learn from history and not repeat this problem.
I would like to introduce to you a representative that's going to represent the healthcare field, Patrick O'Haron. He grew up in rural Wisconsin, joined the Air Force after high school, and worked as a pararescue paramedic. He did his residency at Oregon Health Sciences University in Portland, and now works here in Salem as a trauma and acute care surgeon.
The transport of coal is implicated in lung disease, delayed lung development in children,
cardiovascular disease like strokes and heart attacks, and neurologic disease. As a medical and a doctor and a surgeon, let me convey this as plainly as I can. This stuff makes you sick. And what stuff am I talking about? Well, let's start with coal dust and diesel particulates as just a few. Coal dust is the known cause of black lung disease. Diesel particulates contain known carcinogens. Of course, not every coal miner gets black lung disease, and not every person exposed to diesel particulates gets cancer. How much exposure is okay? Well, we don't really know. That science is incomplete. We could, however, study tens of thousands of Oregonians by rolling hundreds of coal trains past their communities every month. Each of these trains loses roughly 30 pounds of coal dust per mile. 30 pounds of dust. Think about that. That's a lot of dust. But maybe we shouldn't do that study after all.
Yeah.
Well, what about using covered barges instead of trains? The barges have their own not insignificant set of problems. But regardless of how this coal is transported to Asia, when it gets there, it's burned. And that releases toxins and CO2. I don't know if people have had a chance to see the pictures of the air quality in Beijing in this January. But the pollution can be seen from space. And where does all that toxin-laden smog end up? Well, the prevailing winds blow it across the Pacific Ocean and ends up back here. And that's not to mention CO2. I don't really have time to discuss the grave public health implications of climate change, but suffice it to say it's probably the greatest problem that we face. So let me tell you a story. As an intern, as a surgical intern, one of your duties is to round on all the patients on your service in the morning before the team arrives. So I was a new intern at the VA hospital, and it was about 5 in the morning, and there was a patient who I was particularly fond of who I could not find, which was odd because he had just undergone surgery to remove part of his lung from lung cancer. So as I'm frantically looking about for him, one of the nurses clued me in, and I walked outside the hospital and crossed the street, and there he was smoking. And he was smoking through his stoma because this wasn't his first major operation. He had his smoking had caused him to have throat cancer, and he'd had most of his throat removed as well. So this patient is all of us. Our habit is burning fossil fuels. And that particular cigarette that he was smoking the day after his second major operation that was caused, a cancer caused by his smoking, is this coal export project. But let me end with the story of another smoker. And that's my mom. My mom smoked in her 20s, but the day she found out that she was pregnant with my older sister, she quit, and she never touched another cigarette again. And that's the choice that we need to make. And that's why I'm calling for Governor Kitzhaber, both as a public servant and as a fellow doctor, to ensure that an area-wide environmental impact statement is done, that a comprehensive health impact assessment is done, but most importantly, that these permits for coal export, now for Amber Energy and others, are denied.
As a child growing up in the Milwaukee area, my dad was a native Oregonian. He had the opportunity to take me out camping and fishing all throughout my early days. Many of you might be familiar with things like the hog line on the Willamette River, fishers that would go out and fish for salmon. I got to be a part of that when I was a kid and got to learn a lot about fishing, but also about protecting our native species in our rivers. My dad also did a good job at taking me to fish hatcheries and meeting with people. In fact, our old homestead was donated back to the government, and there's a fish hatchery now near our old homestead near Waldport. Now, why do I talk about that? Because coal has a negative impact on our waterways and our natural environment. And next, I would like to introduce Bob Reese of Tillamook. He's the president of the Northwest Guides and Anglers Association. Bob is a sixth-generation Oregonian, a lifelong sportsman, and a professional fishing guide for salmon, steelhead, and sturgeon in the Northwest for over 2 decades.
As you've heard, I've been guiding for over 20 years. I've been fishing for over 30 years. It's just been something that's gone down in my family for generation to generation. I represent one of over 30 fishing guides and businesses dependent on sport fishing. I am a full-time fishing guide for over 20 years. I'm not only in this business for the pleasure of seeing a son or a daughter catch their first salmon, but if the fishing is good, I get to take home fresh fish to my family. We're raising a daughter, 4 years old now, on what we believe to be organically grown fish and wildlife grown in Oregon or just offshore, but with health warnings of mercury poisoning in our informational pamphlets. We're just not sure anymore. Compounding the problem is the fact that scientists are pointing to a crisis issue happening in our oceans. The acidification in the Pacific not only threatens the most basic forage for baby salmon, it's already wreaking irreparable harm to an oyster hatchery just a few miles from my home in Tillamook, Oregon. The hatchery is losing up to half of their juvenile production because of harmful pH levels from Netart's Bay, considered the cleanest estuary in the state of Oregon.
Yeah.
Policymakers can no longer plead ignorance on this issue of coal. The science is too powerful and it's too compelling to ignore. Coal kills. Coal kills ecosystems and coal kills jobs. Sport fishing in Oregon is a $2.5 billion a year industry supporting thousands of families. We've endured severe El Nino events. We've lasted through severely degraded salmon habitats that compromise rebounding runs of wild salmon. But we cannot survive a complete collapse of the ocean ecosystem. Thank you guys for standing by on this issue. Thank you for joining clean industry in our fight against dirty energy. And thank you for helping us send a message to our policymakers that Oregon is closed to coal exports.
So I think you can see that we share common values and commonalities with each of our speakers. Our next speaker, we all have something in common once. We were all young at one time. I know I was. And if you're standing here today, then you made it through your youth years. Our next speaker is Larissa DeHaas. She grew up in Idaho, surrounded by mountains and her family farm. She is now an environmental science major and varsity track athlete at Willamette University. Larissa.
We are gifted now as like the young students that we are able to go to a great university like Willamette and all the schools throughout Oregon and get a higher education. And we don't have to get married and have children right away. So we go and we pursue our PhDs and wait until our 30s to start families. And more young women in their 30s and more young couples are finding out that they can't have children, that they're infertile. And every day another child is born with developmental effects. And as more case studies come out about mercury contamination causing all this neurotoxicity, it's scary to think that we still are trying to rely on coal. The time has passed. I no longer turn 18 and get married and have children. We no longer burn coal in our houses. We no longer need coal to come through our communities. So I think it's time. I think it's a moral injustice that 17% of the children in America today are born with developmental effects because of the neurotoxicity and the biomagnification that mercury has done in the fish. Every single state has had a warning go out to its pregnant mothers to not eat fish. So what are we doing? Are we going to be taking away the possibility for all these young children and myself to be able to experience the joys of parenthood? It's a moral injustice, and I do not support coal trains whatsoever.
Isn't it great that the state of Oregon is turning out great young leaders like that? Today I would like to introduce the Reverend Richard R. Davis. He has served as the senior minister at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Salem, Oregon for the past 20 years. He's served on the boards of the Salem City Club, the Salem Pastoral Counseling Center, and the Salem Ministers Association.
I bet if we knocked on the doors of our neighbors' houses, it might be that a lot of our neighbors would, oh yeah, I've heard something about the coal trains. I've heard a little bit about them. I don't know what it is. You know, it is so hard to get information into people's minds because we have this age of infobesity. Everything's coming at us all the time. That you have a hard time determining what's really, really important. But somehow we've got to get this into people's minds, but then not just into their minds, it's got to sink down into their hearts where they realize, hey, this will really hurt. This will really hurt our community. This will hurt our children. This will hurt our grandchildren. It's so hard for people to translate the potential of something happening into the actuality of it happening. But this could happen. This could happen. These energy industry, the coal companies, they have deep pockets. They have deep pockets. And they are used to getting their own way. They know how to lobby legislatures. They know how to tweak their PR messages and make it seem as though jobs, 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 and they'll downplay and they'll say things that aren't true, and they'll say that, oh yes, we're going to spray surfactants on the cars and there'll hardly be any coal dust coming off. Never mind that the rain will wash the surfactants away and all sorts of things will happen, and there's just so many things that we don't know. And then people will ask, how come? How come this happened? And the answer will be because in 2013, enough people didn't say no. Enough people. There were a few, but they were easily dismissed as environmental cranks and jerks and knee-jerk type people who just always are against everything progressive, or not progressive, but you know what I mean.
Deadly.
You ever heard that quote? It's from Edmund Burke, I believe. All that's necessary for evil to prevail. And I think what the coal trains, we don't need to get into a theological discussion of evil, but all that is necessary for evil to prevail, and I think the coal trains will have evil consequences. All that is necessary for evil to prevail is what? So we have to go out there, each one of us, and we have to give people hope. Hope that their voice can make a difference.
Yes. Yes.
But we're going to sound the alarm to convey how important and how urgent this situation is. We are sounding the alarm to stop the coal imports. So we're going to do a countdown, okay? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What can we do from here? That's been a question that I've heard a lot today. Contact your legislators. Contact the governor. Before April 1st, contact the Department of State Lands with your comments, with your concerns, with your opposition to coal transport. Let your local leaders know. We have an opportunity to stop coal coming through the Northwest. We've already seen companies back out of the Coos Bay, International Port of Coos Bay project. With us sounding the alarm and speaking our voice to our local leaders, we can make this happen.